All right. Good evening, everyone. This is Tuesday, August 2nd, School District of Waukesha Teaching and Learning Committee meeting. And our first item of business is verification of meeting posting.
It's been posted.
Thank you. Second topic is approval of the teaching and learning minutes from the July 12th, 2022 meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Kozlowski.
Second.
Second by Mr. Zenobia. Any concerns or questions about the minutes? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstaining?
Aye.
Okay. 401.
Abstain.
Thank you, Stacy. All right. Next item on our agenda is an opportunity for public comment. We have one speaker tonight. As such, they will be allowed 5 minutes to speak and will be notified at 3 minutes. We expect speakers to honor our time limit, refrain from using any inappropriate language, and be respectful in their comments. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be prohibited from speaking at future board or committee meetings. Speakers are here to address the board, not the audience. The school board and this committee does not endorse any comments made by members of the community here tonight. We'd like to remind our community members of the impact of their words on others and that our students are watching. We commit to communicating with you in respectful and productive ways and ask that you do the same. We also expect that the audience will be respectful of the speaker and of the board and refrain from responding with verbal comments, cheering, applause, or other behavior that will detract from the meeting. Please note that no obstructions can be created between the board and the audience. Visual aids cannot be used, and the area behind the speaker and podium will be clear during public comment. Also, out of respect to our speakers and meeting participants, please silence your cell phones at this time. Our speaker tonight is Paul Reese. Mr. Reese.
Good evening. This summer has been one of the best summers I've had in my life. I have got a 4-year-old that's just fantastic. I've been up to Retzner nonstop catching snakes, turtles, frogs, toads. It's just been a blast. He's 4 years old. Had he been born a couple weeks earlier, he would have started kindergarten this year instead of K4. And he might have ended up in a depraved teacher like Monica Wheely's classroom. Someone who thinks boys can become girls and promotes it and wants to lead children into a life of depravity and just self-harm and rob from them something of so innocence. I just can't get over when I'm walking with my son just how carefree he is and cares so little about this kind of garbage that he just wants to be a kid. The 4 greatest words I've ever heard, Dita, hold my hand. And it's just the greatest time. And to have a teacher so depraved that would do such things to children is unbelievable. Someone who's into mutilating would stand for genital mutilation of a child. To do an addictomy or chopodictomy on a kid is just grotesque. It's obscene how bad this is. And to say that a kid, you're relying on a child's consent to do these things. Is what it comes down to. If you're going to give a child puberty blockers, so that means it comes before puberty, then you're relying on their consent in order to do this. So if a child can give consent to do these type of things to them, where's the line drawn? Where's the line drawn with sex? If they can get consent to do these mutilation things, why can't the same children consent to have sex? And if sex is just a construct of one's imagination, what is age? Why do I have to be 50 years old? Why can't I be 15 and identify it? Where do we draw the lines around this place in rights and wrongs? You know, they say if we don't do this, these children will self-harm themselves if I don't recognize it. Well, there was a thing called the Jim Crow South that was led by the Democrats, and there was not a great escalation in African-American suicide rates. And when the Democrats ran the South, it was horrific for them. They had it tough. They really had it hard. They had to be separated and everything. And they didn't have this high suicide rate because other people didn't approve of who they were. They knew who they were. God created them exactly who they were and how they were. It was other people's problem that didn't want to accept them for who they were. It wasn't theirs. And that's a difference between someone being what they are and someone trying to pretend what they are, and someone leading them into something that they're not. I'm going to read something because the militant left really gets it right when they want to. They will get it right when they want to. And here, the Washington Post had an article in it this week about AR-15s and talking about guns. So here's what they said. And I'm going to jump halfway down the article, the paragraph in. It wasn't that he was worried about Evan becoming some sort of bad guy with the gun. It was that Evan was 18. The part of his brain associated with rational decision-making still wasn't formed. He was impressionable. They're saying that about an 18-year-old. I'm talking about an 8-year-old. How grotesque is that? They can get it right when they want to. They know right and wrong. They got it right here. An 18-year-old is impressionable. But how much more is an 8-year-old? When we use propaganda like love, how many of you remember anyone telling a teacher having to tell you they loved you on a daily basis? They use that as a tool. And some kids suck up to that because they don't have a household that they feel loved. And so they use that to twist their thoughts and say, well, I love you if you are this way. I love this kid because he's this way. Or African-American students have been under the last few years, Black Lives Matter. All of a sudden we got Monica Wheeling wearing t-shirts that Black trans lives matter.
30 seconds.
I have a new bar to get over. I now have to be trans to matter. This is just, it's reprehensible. It's disgusting, and I hope it changes. Thanks.
Okay, our first order of business, first action item for tonight is an action to discuss, possibly approve the updates to Board Policy 2240, controversial issues in the classroom. All right, last month, if you recall, we had some recommendations from Neola that were provided to us. We had a motion to keep the policy as is that wasn't seconded. So we have a new revision that is actually in the packets in board docs for you tonight. It includes some integration of the Neola comments, some reduction of redundant comments. So the green is new, the red is removal. And this is an edit that I provided to Mrs. Landish as a possible compromise on what we had received from Neola and some of the discussion that we had. But this is open for discussion. Or for motion. Mr. Zenobia.
Yes, I do have a question. Maybe it's a clarifying question on letter C, which says, which may have political, social, or personal impacts on students and/or the community. I think the political aspect of that is understood in this policy, but I guess maybe it's a little vague, the social or personal impacts. What are some of those, or why is that language there?
Mm-hmm. This was language that was actually lifted from some other policies that I had gone through. I do agree with you that there's some complexity in probably defining what that means for an individual. But the one thing I would point out, and might be topic for discussion too, is that there are ands between these. So where C is having political, social, or personal impact on students and or the community, and which is likely to arouse both support and opposition in the community, those may be redundant and could be collapsed, which I don't have any particular argument against, but this was consistent with some language in other policies. None of this was language that I created. It was either taken from Neola or other district policies. Would you be proposing to possibly strike that, or do you have a modification?
No, I guess my question was more of one of clarity of specifically which instances, perhaps the policies that were used in the creation of these changes. I just don't know if that language is too vague. I guess I'm interested to hear some other thoughts.
Yeah, we're here to discuss, so.
So that was my reasoning.
Any other comments or thoughts? Mrs. Kozlowski?
Thank you. I've spent quite a bit of time with this policy since our last meeting, with the viewpoint that what we're trying to do, and we have the critical need to do, is to educate our children. And when it comes to controversial topics, I have an opinion that we're walking a fine line with where education versus opinion comes into, and this does play on political, social, and personal impacts based on that. So we are addressing topics that will have very strong reactions from our students, from our staff, from our administrator, and our parents. And our job is to ensure that the curriculum and the discussions that are happening are fostered in a way that is exercising sound judgment, being aware of what the impact is on students of all sides to that. So I do think that political, social, and personal impacts does play a key role, because these are directly impacting not only our students, which is our number one concern, to make sure that their education is being done, allowing them to form opinions of varying balances and critically think to come to their own conclusion. I think it's a gray area for us that I would ask that our administrators and our teachers be wise of when offering and engaging in controversial issues, because in today's society, these are heavy topics. They come with big emotions, they come with a lot of different perspectives, and I think we just need to be wise as to how we're navigating them.
Mr. Como?
Yeah, I'm okay with B and C, primarily because of the word may. And, we don't know really what the impact is on each individual child. Even after they talk about the subject, we may not know. So, there's no way we can know for sure ahead of time. And I think we're just saying, we're just trying to define what a controversial issue is. And I was okay with just A and D, but I'm fine with adding B and C too. So I could go back to the original way. May helps out, I think, B and C for me. I think what this adding B and C does is it just, brings to the attention, that this is what the board is thinking. Is part of the definition of controversial, and I'm okay with it. I'm okay with the ads. I think it gives enough. It gives more detail than just A and D alone.
Thank you, Mr. Como. Anyone else? Mr. Zenobia?
Thank you. I did just want to make one other comment. We had discussed this last month, and part of the reason I didn't want to reject the changes that were proposed was there were a couple things that I think really strengthened the policy. The first was making it appropriate, these conversations appropriate to the age and maturity of the students in those discussions. And also, there was a stipulation about things being discussed, employment issues in the district. And I think for those two reasons alone was why I was hesitant to just throw out the whole policy. The fact that they're in here now, I think, strengthens the overall policy. I am not one to say that controversial issues should not be discussed, or that even teachers should not give their opinions. I think that's important as long as it's done in the right context and the right understanding of, the students that are participating in that discussion. So I'm glad to see that those things remained here. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Como?
Yeah, in the following paragraph, we added E and F, and it might be hard to have a crystal ball for those. I get what we're trying to get at, but I think those are results. So if those are results, I don't know if we can really, if we should include those. Maybe it's a goal. I don't know if we can say does not cause, but maybe we could say try not to cause, or, the way it's worded is it's a result. And I just don't think we should be having results in that section.
And I will just clarify, one of those was from recommendation from the original Neola language, that was E. And F was one that recurred in some of other policies for which Neola also provides support. So, again, I'm trying to find that balance
Sure,
of different
sure.
language. So then I would say, item C also maybe fits the same criteria, does not tend to indoctrinate or persuade to a particular point of view. But I think it's hard. I think that's the challenge, and probably what some of our community members have raised too. This policy's been in place for a while. It's, we've got these recommendations coming toward us to try to make it clearer, and
Right.
maybe in some cases, these items don't. And then we could decide that we don't need them,
Sure.
So, substantial disruption, I think that's a question of circumstances. But the thing that kind of leads me here is the sentence that's leading into these A through F. The board will permit the introduction of controversial issues when use in the instructional program meets the following criteria. And so it's not necessarily, the random topic that comes up in the classroom, but it's use in the instructional program. And so we're asking that there be some foresight to whether these topics do meet some of these criteria. But I don't think any of us can predict what, random topics might come up. But again, I'm not married to the specific language. I was
Sure.
just trying to integrate what Neola had recommended with what we saw some other best practices were. And if any of you want to make a recommendation to remove, I think, we could look at that as presented. If there's, I think what I heard Mr. Como say was that in the top paragraph, B and C were kind of neutral for him. Ms. Kozlowski supported it. Mr. Znobby asked for clarification. If it doesn't substantially improve the policy, we could consider taking those out. The same with some of the others below. I mean, we do have policies on the books as well with respect to hostile environment and non-discrimination. Those policies, function above and beyond this in
Sure.
particular, right? In fact, there are,
And similar language to language.
Yeah.
You lifted the similar language, kind of paralleling
yeah,
what we have had before.
yep, so that exists as well. So it, really is for us as a committee to decide what we're comfortable with and what's actually actionable. I think that's the other item.
Well, maybe it's just rephrasing that opening sentence. Let me work on that a little bit. Maybe I can get a little bit more comfortable as opposed to not having it be results-oriented. But maybe results are clear, too. I mean, I think the advantage of this language is we're making it clear that we do not want to cause. a disruption. We do not want to have a hostile school environment. We want to talk on these issues, these controversial issues. We want them in the class, and we permit those being in the classroom. And so maybe it's okay to be clear about what we believe the results are. So from that perspective, I think it's strong.
I think that's a really good point. That's kind of the intent, right? And if we're saying, I mean, the point that I guess is most important to me in this is D, encourages open-mindedness and conducted in a spirit of scholarly inquiry. That's what we want. And we want to do it in a way that it's not disruptive, that it's not creating tensions, unnecessary levels of, tensions in the classroom. The item B was actually lifted from, there was a paragraph that Neola had recommended that had that reference to age and maturity level, and so I just lifted that to the list. So I think you make a really good point.
And I'm glad we do have B added. I do think there have been a number of constituents, many constituents who've been saying that for a fairly long time. And it's something I think that does really strengthen, and that clarity I think is necessary with everything that we've been trying to do, I think, over the past year, actually. So I'm getting comfortable with it. I'm just kind of working through it here.
And I would clarify too, I mean, I think when the edits are collapsed, compared to what Neola had recommended, it actually gets shorter because a lot of the paragraphs are removed because they were redundant. And that was my justification around the sentence in the middle that was removed because it was redundant with some other areas, as well as there was a sentence on page 2 that was a strikeout because it was actually covered in the bullet list on the front end.
Yep. That second paragraph there, yeah.
Yep, and then that sentence that was added with respect to discussion of employment-related issues came directly from the Neola policy, and then the advance notice as well. Anything else? Dr. Cook?
Just for drafting, when we submit this for publication, if it passes, do you want state of the abbreviation, or would you like Wisconsin spelled out fully?
Whatever is appropriate, that's consistent with our other policies. I didn't know if we were just referencing state or if we were updating that on all of our policies.
Oh, we'll edit that to state of Wisconsin.
That's fine, thank you. I think that might have also been a legacy because I think this policy was cast over a number of districts, so it's just state. The floor is open for modifications if anybody wants to make them.
So I just wanted to kind of follow up to Mr. Como and Mr. Zenobia. I think that the entire concept of controversial issues is that they are indeed controversial. There's not a gray, it's not black and white. There are going to be strong opinions on either side, and the expectation really hits down to the audience being age appropriate. The lesson is planned, navigating and really having the accountability for all involved in the topics to have a mutual level of respect, to share and allow differing opinions to be heard without having an adverse reaction to that. With that, I think that the E needs to remain in. My expectation is that the safety and welfare of our students to receive an education where they will be able to critically think at an age-appropriate level is an expectation. I do hear that it is a result, for sure, but as these conversations are being hosted, the expectation is that there is control and accountability for all participants.
Thank you. Anyone else? Would anyone like to take action on this policy?
I would make a motion to approve the policy as presented.
Thank you. Seconded by Mr. Moore. Any further discussion or questions? Mr. Zenobia?
I do have one question. This is kind of off this policy, so I don't want to, get too far off of where we are on the agenda. But I am curious, if we change this policy as it is presented here, how would this then affect some other aspects? For instance, clubs or activities that are sponsored where teachers are taking participation. I mean, this would apply, generally speaking. I mean, again, I don't want to get too far.
We have specific policy on, extracurricular, co-curricular clubs and activities. So if there was something that the board wanted to do in and around those policies, make adjustments, we would have to address those policies specifically. This would be just the stuff that's happening in the classroom.
And there's no, and I'm aware of the policy, but there's no similar language right now that would be in.
I don't believe so. I'd have to go back.
And it's just kind of an inquiry for future reference. I was just curious. So thank you.
If I understand what you're asking correctly, it's that specific concern that there may be matching language in an extracurricular policy that would need to be updated. And I'm not aware that there is, but.
Right, and because of controversial issues where teachers or staff are involved, then, in other areas that are taking place on district grounds, would those considerations be something we'd want to, look at? And again, I know there's a policy, I know it probably needs some additional looking at, but.
Right, and with the clubs and activities, I mean, those are extension opportunities for a lot of our students. So
Right.
if we had a debate club, if you take the counterpoint away, you really don't have a debate club, because you'd be, say a controversial issue was the topic that was up for debate, we would be positioning ourselves to lose almost every debate because we'd only have one position. So, from a classroom perspective, the policy is the universal thing. The clubs are voluntary in nature, and, with consent to participate in a club, kids, parents are saying, hey, I give my permission for my son or daughter to do this, and then, you kind of know the waters that you're exploring at that point.
That's a good point. Mr. Como?
Yeah, I don't know if this question's for Jody or for Joe, but have either the Neola attorneys or other attorneys of ours reviewed our changes and after we've proposed them or not?
No, I mean, the general language from Neola was what the committee considered.
And that's coming from the attorneys of Neola.
Right, the proposed adjustments, I mean, what the legal reference on this, and I've looked it up several times, going back to even when we drafted it, it really just kind of puts, some parameters on employee speech. That's the Garcetti case that's referenced. And so, an organization does have the ability to put some parameters around things such as these topics. Attorneys haven't reviewed this specifically, but
with what is listed in the Garcetti, you're saying this is probably for.
correct. The board would have the latitude to make the proposed adjustments.
Fair enough, because we don't always have cases listed, driving policy, and I saw that we did have a case that was driving this, so I appreciate that.
That's a great point. Yes, Mr. Zenobia?
Thank you. I just wanted to quickly go back to Dr. Cook's wonderful debate club analogy, which was excellent. My concern in raising the issue was simply more or less around the age-appropriate nature of this change in other clubs. And I don't even know if that's necessarily an issue, but that's where my concern lied. And again, I appreciate that. That was excellent, but thank you. So.
Is there a request for any follow-up in your comment, or?
I would like to follow up with that, with the student policy for clubs, but I don't know if it would fall here in T&L or student services or elsewhere, so. And
We could agendize that for student services if you wouldn't mind waiting until September for us to drop that on the agenda.
that would be fine. Thank you.
Okay, so we do have a motion with a second. Any further comments or questions? All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, 5-0. Thank you, Stacy. All right, back to our next action item, which is request to approve updates to Board Policy 5460, graduation requirements. Does anyone want to start with questions or comments? Mr. Zenobia?
Yes, well, the change here that says a student must have participated in curriculum related to financial literacy in order to earn a diploma. I'm assuming that would be, it's kind of put into economics currently, is that where it's still live?
It's redundant.
Correct, yes, and that was actually listed in the policy. We just moved it under social studies because it was randomly in a different section of the policy, so we tried to, again, most of these changes are clarity and to go under the right category of subject, and that was the case in that one.
Okay.
Can I make a clarifying comment on that? Because I had that in my notes as well. Are we stating that to fulfill the state requirement? Because it is redundant with the fact that we require economics. So it would kind of be moot since we're requiring economics. Assuming that meets the criteria, which I think it does. I mean, it doesn't hurt to leave it there, but I know we moved it, and I don't know if that was more kind of what your point was, but Mr. Como?
Yeah, I had the same portion earmarked here. I thought that we should clarify what financial literacy is referring to, or strike the whole thing. Does personal finance as an elective right now pass that? I mean, I think that's dealing with financial literacy. That's my interpretation. So I don't, if it's already in here, I would prefer to strike it completely, or really let's clarify what we mean by financial literacy right here.
Just for some perspective, if you looked at the item above it, I know it's not up for discussion tonight, but when we've had a statutory change, we've just added the statutory update to the policies so that we stayed in line with that. And so the civics test was built in 3 or 4 years ago, I think. So we just added that in as a standalone statement so that the policy you could directly go back to statute and say that it is in line.
So in this one,
We could-
is this what the statute says?
We have to have the financial literacy component for the graduation requirement, I believe.
Would it help to clarify, just to say which is fulfilled by the economics requirement?
Sure.
Just so that it's clear, this is not a new requirement, it's just we're keeping the statutory language in there so we don't lose track of it if we change graduation requirements? Does that meet?
That helps me.
Great.
Yep.
Okay. So that's one modification, which would be to add, which is fulfilled by the economics requirement to that financial literacy statement. I do have a question that might be a little bit more in-depth. One of the elements in here has the requirement that students taking a high school science course while in middle school must still take 3 additional science credits in grades 9 through 12 to meet the graduation requirement in science. It further states the high school science course taken while in middle school will count toward the total of 25 credits required for graduation, but the course will not be included in the high school GPA. Why not set the expectation that they need to earn a grade of B or better in middle school for this to count toward their 3 science requirements? If you have a student who's actually achieving, is performing strongly in a science course in middle school, I don't understand why then we would say, well, it counts for some things, but it doesn't count for other things in high school. I also don't know if we've got a student who's doing well in middle school in biology that's not going to take more science in high school, but if they choose not to and they've already achieved that high school level, I just don't know why that requirement is there, or why we're taking some of it but not all of it. Mr. Como?
That might be statute-driven, but boy, I mean, it's been a long time since we've worked on graduation requirements.
Well, we talked about this a lot with the econ conversation, and I'm pretty clear that you can fulfill high school credits in middle school as long as you're taking the high school course.
You can, it's strongly recommended that it not be included in the high school GPA. So that's the clarifier that the DPI gives us.
Strongly recommended.
Strongly recommended that we not include it in GPA. And it's supported by our principals as well, based off of who evaluates the teachers, because that ultimately can lead to valedictorian, salutatorian decisions, and, transferring credits, all of that, credits at the university, doesn't factor into the GPA discussion.
Same thing for world languages, I just want to point out. Will not count towards the GPA, so similarly.
Taken in middle school? Is that what you're saying?
So I guess my question is really more, is this just a district requirement? Is there something that I'm missing as far as wanting to force the 3 science classes in high school? Because we still have a minimum number of credits. Is this something that we should invite Mrs. Herman to the table to have further discussion on, or just leave it alone? But I don't know if it makes sense to me unless there's some reason that somebody could explain. Mr. Como.
Well, I'm okay with how it is. I was looking at some of the eyeballs in the audience, reacting to possibly moving in a different direction, and the people in the audience are really well-experienced people in our classrooms and in our schools. So if we were to move away from this, I think we really should be asking our teachers and our principals and our central administration people why or why not to stick to this. I just saw a reaction, and I thought it was a pretty strong reaction. And
Well, and I don't want to respond to body language from people who aren't at the table, so.
well, at a minimum, I want to understand
Yeah.
what DPI has to say.
Yes.
Why, and
Well,
what's
that's-
behind that.
That's my question for Mrs. Landish or anybody else, and if we need to have further conversation on that. Again, I'm just asking why we would have this requirement for a student who is ready to take a high school science class in middle school, why we would force them to then take a 4th science class when they get to high school.
Sure, and that's fair. That's a fair question. I do think it's fair to look at people's reactions to things, though, too. Because I value input from those people, and I usually don't see reactions on people's face as strong as what I did.
I'm more than happy to welcome our administrators to the table. I don't think we have any issue with that, but I'm not able to interpret what people are saying with their heads.
That's fair.
So, and then I have another question. So do we want to continue to talk through this? Does anybody have other comments or questions?
I do have I guess a comment. Is your concern that a student who would take, say, biology and achieve a high grade would then not be incentivized to, I don't know, do well or not take another course in science? I mean, I guess I'm not opposed to giving them credit. I think if you're going to incentivize someone to do something, you should reward them for it. But I guess my concern is, or my question rather, is more clarity of, are you worried that they're going to waste more time taking credits in science, or you want them to put once they get to high school? I mean, are you worried about the 3 credit requirement, or you're saying they could earn part of that and then do something else? And
Here's what I'm objectively concerned about.
Okay.
That we have a 3 high school science credit requirement, and we allow our students to take a high school science class in middle school if they're ready. And then we say, well, those of you who are ready to take a high school science class in middle school get rewarded by being forced to take another science class when you get to high school. And so I don't understand that, and I'm just asking for some clarification on the logic of that. Can anyone help me with that? Dr. Siebert.
So I'm just reading on the DPI website, And what it says is the Department of Public Instruction recommends that high school courses taken in 7th or 8th grade should be so noted on the transcript along with the grade received. However, the grades received should not be factored into the high school grade point average. The reasoning behind that recommendation is that students might shy away from taking a more challenging course because of the future implications on their overall grade point average. That's what it's based
Yeah.
on, I would.
And the GPA, I'm okay with. I'm actually wondering about the additional science credit requirement. If I'm reading this right, if I'm an 8th grader who takes biology and I get to high school, I have to take 3 more science classes. If I'm an 8th grader who doesn't take biology and I get to high school, I only have to take biology plus 2 more science classes.
One of the reasons, Dr. Piasek, and I don't know if this is the exact reason why it's written as it is, but the ACT is generally given during the junior year of high school. And if you maintain that science sequence, you have the ACT exam coming up or the SAT exam, the college entrance, and it kind of gets into the argument of just staying fresh in the subject matter. The science questions on the ACT do trend with you're in your junior year, they're tending towards 3 years of science. And that could be a potential reason why having that third year there could have a positive impact on an ACT score, college preparation and things of that nature.
Mr. Como?
Do you mind if we invite some of the
I would love
people
to.
up if they want
Yes,
to
if
come up?
anybody has the answer who works for the district, I would appreciate them coming forward. If we don't have the answer, we could table this for further discussion.
I just would share that.
Or would you like more time to prepare for this, Mrs. Herman? Yeah, okay, okay. So maybe we just hold this thought for now, but I do have another question. Does anybody else have another question? Mrs. Kozlowski?
So one of the things that just jumps out to me is we've had conversations in the past challenging AP classes, right? Wanting to encourage and enhance students to take AP classes. And now we're going to have students in middle school who are demonstrating advanced set schooling. They should be credited for that. And following up on that, it is then how are we further challenging them to meet them where they're at, right? That's part of all of our goals is to really meet each student where they're at and challenge where they're at. Does this hold them back? Does this push them forward? But I would be challenged as to really why we would not allow that to count and allow them to pursue and gain additional traction in their high school career that most likely is going to further career, college, trades, ready them.
Mr. Como?
I think forcing them to take another science course actually does help in that area. It is more challenging. They do have to cover another subject. So I think it does push them more the way it's written right now.
Mr. Moore?
So, as a teacher myself, I think I have a class of students, right, and they are all individuals. And I can tell the students who are going to, the students who tell me that they want to go to college, that they're going to do these things like take extra classes. I teach middle school, so they're going to take those additional high school classes. But then there are other students who tell me that they don't want to go to college. And I always tell them that's okay. And so they take those classes too, so that they can have more time in high school to take things that may interest them, such as woodshop, such as plumbing, such as a mechanical car mechanics, whatever. I had this one student, he wants to open his own car shop. I said, when I need an oil change, I'll come to you. But like Mrs. Kozlowski said, we have to meet them where they're at. And I think that we can't be putting all students in a box. They're individuals. They are individuals, and I tell you that as a teacher. And so we have to meet them where they're at. And if those students who want to go to college, we'll push them on the college track. But those students who don't want to go are most times forgotten about. And they're forced to be wrapped around this college bubble when that may not be the best fit for them. I think sometimes we fail kids by pushing them into college when they're not ready. They enter college with a degree, or no degree and more debt. And so we got to change focus by, like Ms. Cox said, meeting them where they're at and coming up with those academic plans. And that starts by giving them credit if they've earned it so that they can have more free time in high school to take courses that may prepare them for a career versus college. Those are just my opinion, though, so.
Mr. Como?
I do believe our district offers those children who don't want to go to college opportunities. I mean, MAID, you know, there's a number of things that we do offer, and I think the key is really who are the teachers, who are the counselors, who are the principals, and how are they directing the children? And, you know, there's opportunities really for children, and they're quite broad within our district. And our choice within our district, I don't know of any other district that surpasses the choice that we offer people in terms of different things that they can pursue, very focused ways to go. So I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm just an old timer, been around. There were no charter schools when I first got on the board. What do we have, 6? You know, there's a lot of choice, and but I think the key is as you were saying, the teachers and the principals and the people involved, and making sure that they're working with the kids to make sure that they understand those various opportunities that are available.
I'm sorry.
Can I clarify one thing just before Dr. Cook? And I will concede. I mean, the section that I'm asking about right now is not proposed to be changed. It's really legacy language that triggered a question for me. And so there may be an option here where we're approving changes that simplify the policy, but we come back and have this discussion about these requirements, because I do understand that the purpose of what we're doing here tonight is to kind of collapse and simplify. And that will, come up. My other question is related to something that's also not specifically being addressed in these proposed changes. So that might be something we could talk about as a group. Dr. Cook.
Yeah, the state statute 11833.1 says in the high school grades, all of the following. And the high school grades in Wisconsin are identified as 9 through 12, and Waukesha, we identify them as 9 through 12. At least 4 credits of English, including writing composition, at least 3 credits of social studies, including state and local government, at least 3 credits of mathematics, at least 3 credits of science. And so these are at the high school grades 9 through 12. It goes on to say in grades 7 through 12, so they expand this a little more, at least half a credit of health education. So I think that the state statute is specific in saying that you need 3 credits of science at the high school level in that sequence. And that, I think that that's where you end up ultimately landing on needing 3 credits at the high school, regardless if you took biology, chemistry in middle school. You still then would be moving into AP Bio, AP Chem, AP Physics and such to meet that statutory requirement.
Well, thank you. That's the clarification that I was looking for. All right. Mr. Como.
Yeah, I move approval of policy 5460 as amended, and the amendment that I'm speaking to is the clarification of financial literacy with fulfilled by the economic requirement.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Zenobia. I do have another question that I'd like to present. I apologize. The other question is actually related to the physical education waiver for athletes who are participating in WIAA activities. It indicates that physical education would be waived for athletes in these sanctioned activities, but that those students must complete an additional 1/2 credit in English, social studies, mathematics, or science in lieu of the 1/2 credit of physical education. I do not understand why we would not allow them to take music, art, tech ed, or any other dual credit opportunity in those circumstances, because that additional 1/2 credit does, from what I can tell, does not fulfill any state statute. So the way it reads is they can be waived unless there's something, again, in the statutes that I don't understand, but they can be waived if they're an athlete, an active athlete, but must complete additional 1/2 credit in English, social studies, mathematics, or science in lieu of the physical education credit. Mr. Como.
Boy, going back, I remember when we introduced this, and We spent several meetings on it. This was hard to get our hands wrapped around it. But I agree, I don't know why an elective couldn't be, we still have the 25, credits, but it might be statute-driven.
Dr. Siebert might be clarifying that.
Mr. Cuomo.
Thank you.
Mr. Cuomo is correct. It is statutory from 2011, Wisconsin Act 105, which is statute 11833, sub 1, sub E, and it specifies that they complete an additional .5 credits in English, social studies, mathematics, science, or health education in lieu of .5 credits in physical education.
Mr. Como?
I don't agree with it, but sometimes we have to follow those statutes, right? But I see what you're saying, and I think, personally, I think an elective should count, and it should be included in there, but I don't know if it's worth pushing this from a legislative perspective, but we could maybe put it on the list for Dr. Siebert potentially to reach out to the appropriate
Thank you.
people, so.
Dr. Siebert, what was the statute number again?
11833,
Okay.
sub 1, sub E.
Okay. And those are all cited at the end of the policy. So I do appreciate, I apologize that I did not take the time to go and read those specific statutes on these questions, where I probably would have found all the answers. On this physical education one, this might be something worth resolution. So. Thank you for those clarifications. I appreciate your patience with my questions. I don't have any more at this time, and we have a motion that is seconded. Any further questions? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Thank you. All right, the next topic on the agenda, action to approve updates to policy 2340, field trips and other district-sponsored trips. And you will see that the modifications actually begin slightly on the bottom of page 2, and carry through a couple things on page 3 and page 4. Mrs. Landish, did you want to provide clarification on the changes that were proposed?
Sure, because it's a very long policy. So the gist of the changes that are for your consideration this evening are mostly around the international travel. And we are saying that no longer applications for all international field trips basically are only accepted if it is a competition, at the competition level. So I'll use robotics because that was an example. Should they go and make the state competition and then go to like what would be a national competition, we would allow that. But we would not, again, the language we're adding is on page 3 on the top where it says applications for international field trips or any field trips where the cost is over $1,500 are required no later than 18 months in advance. And the applications for domestic trips where the cost is less than $1,500 are required no later than 12 months in advance. So that was a change, right, from the first edit. I'm trying to look for the change around the overnight trip, but that's not green lined here.
Do we define?
There it is, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Dr. Piasek.
No, go ahead.
On page 4,
Thank you.
this is a very long policy and some things are in different areas. So on page 4, this is the biggest change that the board needs to be aware of. The school district of Waukesha will not approve or endorse international travel for any school-sponsored club or activity unless it's a series of competitions. So hence my robotics example with that. So usually our extracurriculars aren't going to nationals. Maybe, I guess I would say dance and cheer sometimes would have like a national competition. Maybe DECA, I'm thinking of the ones FBLA, some of those. So that would be as part of the school-sponsored activity.
Mr. Como?
Yeah, I think robotics has an international competition, but I think it's always been in the U.S.
It was this year, but
Yeah.
who knows, right?
St. Louis or in Florida, I think, or a couple of the places, I don't remember. Yeah, so I can appreciate, I think this came about because of some of the complexities that we ran into the last couple of years. So basically, essentially, what the school district is doing is divorcing itself from really sponsoring any international trip that we have considered in the past, like for Spanish-speaking students to go to Spain or, another Spanish-speaking country. There's been a few places. It wouldn't be sponsored by our district, but it doesn't mean that those things couldn't happen, correct? I mean, it would mean that individuals would have to get together and decide to do this on their own. Is that really so that we don't have to get involved with all the complexities of COVID or not COVID, all the things that changed during the time? Is that what's driving this?
I mean, my understanding of this change is that we would no longer have district-level support, approval, or endorsement for any activity that takes students outside of the United States,
Correct.
unless it's related to
Correct.
a district-sponsored competitive activity.
Right, but there would be nothing stopping a teacher saying, hey, I'd like to still organize a trip and put information out to families, like on their own?
We need to clarify that.
Okay, well, that's
No.
why I'm bringing it up.
There would be nothing stopping families from traveling with their own students wherever they want to go. I mean, but the involvement of, my understanding, the involvement of any district employees would be not as district employees, would not be part of their job or authorized as part of their
Okay.
job responsibilities.
So I'm just wondering, are other districts doing this? Why are we doing this?
Yes, other districts are doing it. We actually took some of this language from a neighboring district who uses similar policy around international trips. If I had to guess, some of the same reasons you mentioned, Mr. Como, are the complexities of the different situations with international travel, with raising large amounts of money for students, posing equitable issues for students across the system. There's just a lot of variables that make that, although great opportunity, very complex.
Okay.
And we do have a section of the policy, Mr. Como, that does talk about non-district sponsored trips. So it wouldn't preclude someone from, a ABC travel company saying, hey, we're willing to take a group of teenage kids to Spain. It's just we wouldn't be endorsing that. We wouldn't be advertising it. We wouldn't be coordinating that as part of a school district. So there could be opportunities for this. It just would be detached from the district. And we've had a number of situations. Take COVID out of the mix. We had a field trip or a trip planned to go to France, and just prior to the trip going, this goes back 4 or 5 years ago, there was a terrorist attack in France. And so what do we do in that situation? So it does pose levels of risk to our students, variables that by leaving the country, we have very little control over, and it's been a challenge for us for a number of years. This is not a recent revelation. I mean, we've talked about this for some time.
Right, and I saw the stress on the teachers' faces who were, trip was going to Canada, and, who's vaxxed, who isn't, and, and if someone catches it over there, who has to come back, does the teacher have to stay, all those things that we talked about. There's some complexities. I mean, I really am saddened to lose some of those opportunities. I mean, I've been a part of approving those for a lot of years, and I get how that can enrich the students' lives, but we do live in different times. And I do recall the example you gave and some of the things that have happened over the last couple of years, and I can see why is there more than one district, Jody, that we reached out to on this? I mean, is this like more prevalent now, or is this?
I think it's becoming more prevalent. We looked at 5 different neighboring policies, thanks to Stacy, as we were crafting the changes to this one.
Okay. All right, I appreciate the research on that.
So from what I understand, the other substantive modification is that there would be a 12-month advance notice for trips, for domestic trips that are under that $1,500 cost, which may help in some cases where we haven't had enough lead time on some national level trips. But the sensitivity, again, is to the fact that not every family has $1,500 to $4,500 laying around to do some of these trips, and so that advance notice is really important. And that 12 months might give us a little bit more opportunity to participate in things that we would otherwise have to pass up on. Any other questions or comments about this? Mr. Zenobia?
Just one comment, I guess, kind of in the spirit of why this is being done. I do recall the trips we discussed at length at the beginning of this year, I think it was. And at that time, I was very much in support of letting those people who had worked hard and paid and organized the trip to go, even under circumstances that with COVID traveling restrictions may have put someone there longer than they'd want to be, or a child away from their family. So my point being, it's very hard to put the choices of, say, 30, 40, 50 families that were working to go in the hands of 9 people. Then they decide their fate at the last minute. They lose out on funds. I mean, there is that aspect to this as well, and I think it's unfair, at least from, the instances we discussed at length then, to put staff and teachers and families in positions where a board then has to make hard choices for them. I don't think that's good policy. And so if people want to take trips, they are able to do so. I hope a lot of people take those opportunities in the future that can. But I do support these changes. I think it simplifies not only the district's concerns, but takes away their decision-making and the priorities of families that are trying to do things that they feel are important. So I would move to approve this policy as presented.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Kozlowski. I apologize, but I'm going to make one possible request for a modification to the policy, and that would be that the sentence that was added on page 4 that says the school district of Waukesha will not approve or endorse international travel, et cetera, could be moved higher in the policy, because I think it becomes confusing when it's so far down. So I would like it to be moved above the other section that was added, applications for international field trips. So if we could just add it above that section on page 3, I think that would add clarity.
So basically, Dr. Piasek, just to clarify, on the bottom of page 2 where it says, according to the following procedures, then we lead with the school district of Waukesha. Yeah, okay.
I'm not sure that I follow you. Bottom of page 2?
So the bottom of page 2 has.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, just want to clarify. We'll make that change.
Would you guys accept a friendly modification to that motion as presented? Okay. Any other questions or Dr. Cook?
Just one question. If we had any field trips that were currently approved, would the board or committee be willing to grandfather those in as already approved, and this then is a change that goes forward?
I'll comment first. I believe that would be appropriate, since those students have already begun fundraising and planning for those trips. But that's my opinion.
We have
Do we need to take an action about that?
one trip.
Any other comments?
Which
Mr. Como?
trip?
The Canadian trip that we've seen numerous times. We have one outstanding trip, the Canadian trip, that was rescheduled from last year going into.
And the year
they're now
before.
scheduled to go in June of 2023.
Mr. Como?
I think they've
It was
earned it, just
rescheduled
the
4
number of times they've come back here. I forgot that was still outstanding
I did
even.
too until Stacy.
Oh, my.
This is the trip that has 19 and 20-year-olds on it from
Oh, my gosh,
middle
yes.
school. Yeah.
Wow.
I don't feel that we need to take any action. I mean, it's already approved and it's underway, so I think this is going forward. Yeah. I don't want to get yelled at in French. All right, so we have an action our motion that's seconded with a minor modification. Any further questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 5-0. And that concludes our initial group of actions. So the next item on the agenda is a discussion item, and we will be focusing on Avid. We have Ms. Wagner with us tonight. And thank you for already providing us an overview of the program via the video presentation that can be found in the link on Board Docs. We have the PowerPoint presentation here available. We'll get that. Can we get that? Just use this one.
Not working either. Yours is working.
Testing.
Okay, we have a little technical difficulty. Well, we're back, so we don't know where the static is coming
Yes.
from. No.
Is there a handheld mic that's turned on accidentally or something?
So I'm going to ask everybody to just mute your mics. We have a hot wire on the floor that Dr. Siebert is kicking. Okay. All right, well, why don't we transition to, that's not going to happen. Okay. You just need to kick it really hard. Okay. Okay.
Is yours off? Is it off? Oh.
Hi,
Okay,
everyone.
well, welcome back.
Okay. I'm Amanda Wagner. I serve as our Avid coordinator, K through 12 here in the school district of Waukesha. And joining me tonight is,
Hi, I'm Alyssa Yao, Director of Elementary Teaching and Learning.
would you like me to walk through some of the highlights with you?
You shared a lot with us, and the presentation was excellent. I don't know if anybody has any questions to lead with, but if you want to start with just a high-level summary to get us on track, and then we can jump in with questions.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
So our Avid system here in Waukesha has been present since 2009 when it began at Waukesha High School. We are next year going to be serving all of our elementary and secondary schools minus our STEM schools. And when we talk about Avid, there's different components. We have Avid school-wide, which impacts all of our students. The way that Avid school-wide impacts all of our students is through skills and strategies such as focused note-taking, organization of time, materials, and thoughts, critical reading, WICOR, which is writing, inquiry, collaboration, organization, and reading practices. When we talk about Avid Elementary, students as young as kindergarten through 5th grade are working on the skills I just spoke of. They're also working on a lot of leadership and self-advocacy skills. When students reach 7th grade, they have the ability to be part of our Avid Elective programming. Avid Elective is for students, we look at data first, pull data, we look at our middle-of-the-road academic student. We then go to our teacher teams and we ask who are some students who have the ability to be pushed, who would thrive with support in taking some honors or advanced placement courses when they get to high school. Many of our Avid Elective students are first-generation college-going students, underrepresented in the traditional college-going population, or any student who really advocates for being part of that Avid Elective. They also, in 7th grade, we have something called Avid Excel, which happens in 7th and 8th grade, which is designed for our English language learners. The difference between the Avid Elective and Avid Excel is Avid Excel focuses heavily on academic language, giving our English language learners and equipping them with language skills so that when they go into 9th grade, they can be part of that Avid Elective and continue to find success. Avid Elective, again, 7th, 8th, up 9th through 12th grade. We are finding that many of our students who are starting out in 7th and 8th grade are continuing their Avid journey through high school. What questions do you have?
Thank you. Mr. Como?
More comments and questions probably. Well, Amanda, we go back a long ways, going back to Waukesha South, and just, it's amazing what you and others have done to integrate Avid into our schools. I mean, this is an example of taking something that was working at one school and starting to propagate it throughout our district. And thank you for all of your efforts on this. So, one of the things that way back when we were failing at was we had various programs to help our college-bound students. We've always had those, but we were missing a group of kids, those kids kind of in the middle, kids that might not even know what college is all about. They don't come from a family that has had someone graduate from college. And I know I was one of those first-generation college-going kids, and it was really hard. My parents were extremely supportive. They'd say, go to college. And I'm like, well, what's that mean? And I had to seek out people to kind of understand that. And how do I prepare for that? So this program started out very tiny, very focused at South, has really grown, and we've taken, I think, all the really important components, and we're spreading throughout our district. So I really am pleased to see how this program has grown and has propagated, and I do believe it has fantastic value for our students. Some of the basic things that we're teaching at a very early age, incredible. I mean, we've seen some of those kids present here, and it shows in their presentation skills. Just really very good. The Avid Excel piece, though, I'm really excited about, and that we've been doing for how long?
This will be our 4th school year with Avid Excel.
Yeah, and so one of the issues that we had with children at the middle school level a number of years ago is they'd be coming up through whatever programs we had at the time, learning English. And, and the focus now on the academic language, that I think is a great focus. I don't know, I haven't really looked as close at those results, but that is something that has plugged a hole that we've had for quite a long time in our district. So if you could maybe concentrate a little bit more on Avid Excel and explain in a little bit more detail how that program's working, what are the keys to that, are there still some challenges that we have there, do we need additional training, do we need to get that to grow a little bit more from a teacher perspective?
Absolutely. So one of the biggest celebrations that we've had with Avid Excel is looking at reclassifying our students. We have reclassified within the past 2 years, at least last year, I know we reclassified at least 6 students. And what that means is they are no longer considered an English language learner in terms of services needed. Now, do they still need support? Absolutely, because I think we're all English language learners. When I go to order coffee, because I do not drink Starbucks or any coffee at all, I have no idea what people are ordering because that's not a language I speak. Academically, science, math, English, tech ed, we all have an academic language. And we know that our English language learners need that extra support. So in Excel, what we do is something called a scholar group. And in a scholar group, students work with a particular piece of text. They all have the same text initially, and they dive deeply into that, and they break it apart. And they look for different parts of the text that confuses them. It could be, there's text-dependent questions that they write, and then through collaboration with their peers and a tutor and or teacher or an Avid student from the high school comes down to the middle school to help with some tutoring sometimes, we're able to then help students really dive into those texts and develop their language skills and their critical reading skills. What we're also seeing with Avid Excel is that advocacy. Students feel safe, they feel supported, they feel like they can use their voice in their Avid Excel class, and then they can take those skills and go out into their other classes. Dr. Siebert and I were on a visit at Horning with the legislators, sometime last fall, and one of our Excel students was at a desk, and I said, come over here, explain what you do to these gentlemen, and she's like, they're all wearing suits. I said, you'll be fine. And the way she spoke and articulated what she has become as a student, and she's only a 7th grader, was absolutely amazing. And after that, I mentioned, I said, she's an English language learner, and everyone, they were taken aback because you would not know that with her skills and her leadership that she presented. So our Avid Excel students, they are linguistically talented, and we are just helping them achieve everything that they hope to achieve and giving them opportunities to do so. I think one of our challenges with Avid Excel is getting more students involved in Avid Excel. It's finding the right fit. A student in Avid, part of it is individual determination. It's not a magic pill. If you don't want to embrace focused note-taking and organization and having to work really hard, it's not necessarily going to work for every single student. Another challenge is teacher turnover. We unfortunately have lost a lot of our amazing Excel and elective teachers to other districts, so we have a lot of new people to onboard this year, but we'll be fine.
Yeah, I thank you for those insights. We always have challenges, right? No matter if a program is young or old, there's always different kinds of challenges. I truly appreciate that program and allowing those students to really have that type of support and allow them to really spread their wings. And it was a great example that you gave on the one student, and I'm sure you can give a lot more examples
And I
of,
actually do have one quick one for you. I was talking to one of our seniors who was graduating, and he was asking me about Avid Excel because his sister was interested. And he said, "Oh, Mrs. Wagner, that's what I missed. That's what I didn't get when I joined Avid in ninth grade is I didn't have my academic language skills. I didn't know how to ask for those skills because then when I was taking some of my AP classes, I was struggling. And I finally have pinpointed it's because of my academic language." So,
yeah, well, thank you for all that you do. Appreciate it very much. And all those around you that are part of the program.
yes, we have an amazing team.
Mhm.
You have a question? I've had an opportunity to see at a number of different levels. The feedback from many families, the high school level is very positive. I've seen my own kids with their organization skills, note-taking skills. Some things that even they complained about at some level, not liking the forms or not liking the binders and all that stuff, but it really has created some strong positive behaviors, and I think I've kind of seen that come through as we've matured with it in the district. And I just have a clarifying question because there's a little bit for me, there's an inconsistent message, or perhaps I just don't understand. Sometimes we talk about college readiness as the Avid priority, and then there's discussion about college and career readiness, and I feel like I know what it looks like for students that are college bound. We talk a lot about, we celebrate the scholarships and the schools that they're going to. What does Avid look like for a student that is career bound after graduation?
So your question is spot on because Avid 15 years ago was truly college, hard push for college. Avid has adapted, and we've needed to adapt for a long time, embracing college and career readiness. Not all of our students need to go to college. There are fantastic opportunities in the trades, in going to a two-year school, a tech school, going to serve in the military. What we always want to expose all of our students to is all of the options that there are. So yes, we do expose students a lot in the Avid elective to college, and we look at right fit, but we also explore other options. We really want our students to leave with a plan A, B, and then probably a plan C. Not all of our Avid elective students go on to college. This year, we had at least 3 of our 90-plus seniors go into the military, and at least 7 go into different trades. What we do want is to make sure that every single student who leaves us, if they've been part of the Avid elective, or I think part of Waukesha in general, is all doors are open to them. Because I know from some personal experiences, college wasn't always something that I thought I was going to do, and I changed my mind junior year, and luckily I had decent grades to be able to apply for college.
Thank you. And if I'm looking at this correctly, it would lead me to believe that a student would have to choose either like dual enrollment or Avid, because how does that work? So if Avid is kind of advocating toward higher rigor courses, specific AP courses, how does that work with dual enrollment?
So in the Avid elective, we expect all of our students to take at least one course of rigor. Now, course of rigor is different for everyone. We would like to see all of our students try at least one advanced placement course so that they can experience what those college level classes might feel like. At Waukesha North specifically, they've done an amazing job with their scheduling, allowing students in the Avid elective to also be part of dual enrollment. North and south as well, but many of our students are going to dual enrollment in the morning, and then they come back in the afternoon and they have their elective courses and are able to do both. I know that we have a student, I believe she spoke last year, she was going through the firefighting academy. She just graduated from that and is now a full-blown firefighter, and she started that journey. She was an Avid, she was dead set on going to college, dual enrollment came about, she loved it, and she is now serving our community.
Thank you. Mr. Moore.
Thank you for the services that you all provide. I like what you said about the adaptability. because I'm not that far out of high school, and I am first generation, but, so I'm first in my family to attend college. But I will say that, other options were never exposed to the generation that, many of us come from. It was always go to college. And sometimes, was that always the best decision? And so I really appreciate the adaptability, allowing, this new generation to be exposed to career or technical opportunities, because the last thing we all want to see as students, live with regret or in debt and go places that may not have been the best for them, where they could have been better off, being in cosmetology school and becoming the best hair salon owner, making good money. We actually have one who's just on our board. So like those opportunities, so thank you for that adaptability, and thank you for the service you provide for our students.
Thank you.
Mr. Zenobia.
Thank you. I did have a couple of questions. I guess in the earlier question that Dr. Piasek had raised, what is the, graduation rate, college entry rate that you've seen with the Avid students? Has it lifted the numbers in high school across the board? And do you kind of have some of those numbers or ideas?
So when we look at long-term data of Avid elective students who go to college, a 2 or a 4-year college, we're looking at about 90%. And when we dig real deep into that, many of those students are first-generation college-going students. And some of them will go to a persistence rate. So persistence nationally is when we go from fall of freshman year to sophomore year. That's what they consider persistent. We try to monitor our students all the way through. It gets very challenging to do that, but through social media, we're able to keep up with a lot of them. And we are finding that our students are persisting. Our COVID years have been more challenging than others. A lot of our students who entered college the year of 2020 found great challenge with that, and many of them have taken, I shouldn't say many, but some of them have taken some alternate routes, but we're prepared to do so because we didn't just push college, we also explored other career paths.
And the graduation rate would be obviously higher than that, 90%.
So are you saying graduation from high school?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, yes.
I mean, graduation is it should be 100%, unless there's a crazy extenuating circumstance, which I know
Sure.
this year it was 100%.
One other question, real quick, on the, I'm looking on this graph of the implementation plan.
Yep.
And the only thing I don't see is the 6th grade. So does that, are they not up to speed, or are they being skipped? I'm just asking
that's a
a
good
clarifying
question,
question to
yes.
see why that wasn't represented here.
So we do not start the Avid elective until 7th grade. And we do that on purpose because we have many feeder schools coming from our elementary population. Yes, we have Avid Elementary, but we want that 1 year of transition in 6th grade where students are still being embraced Avid school-wide. Also, the way that our scheduling works, 6th grade, our students do not have a lot of options for elective classes, so we want them to have the ability to take the other electives before making that decision in 7th or 8th grade.
So I guess then my question would be, if they're experiencing this in elementary school and they get to the 6th grade, for lack of a better word, is the framework still there for them to then easily transition through that? This is just a year that is...
So Avid school-wide, it's embracing things such as, focus note-taking, the organization. Those are the two biggest that I think people are familiar with, so I'm going to use those two. And when we train our staff through professional development, they have those skills and they're using those skills in their classroom. So our students, they're taking what they know from Avid Elementary and they're embracing that in 6th grade.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's a key component of our Avid system here in Waukesha is our training of our educators and being very intentional when we're doing professional learning to model the different Avid and WIC core strategies.
Thank you.
Mr. Como?
Thank you. I do appreciate you presenting the challenge earlier. Can you give me a sense of, is the challenge at any one particular level or feature? It's throughout any of the features that you offer? Elementary, secondary, elective and
I think when we specifically
Excel.
look at our elective, we will have a lot of new Avid elective teachers, many veteran experienced teachers in their content areas who are phenomenal, and they will catch on quickly. To teach the Avid elective, we are always looking for teachers who have that belief that all students can and all students will, and I would say that our teachers in Waukesha have that belief.
So how many teachers short are you right now?
We are all hired for our Avid elective teachers.
Okay.
We'll have 17 new Avid elective Excel teachers this year, 7th through 12th grade.
Okay. Are they going to be going to training put on by Avid?
Yep.
Okay.
So most of them will be attending, have already actually attended that training.
Mm-hmm.
We have, I believe, 3 of them who, just due to hiring and whatnot, will not be able to attend the training, but then I will be working very closely with those new teachers to make sure that we have them onboarded, and that is my role. I support all of our Avid elective teachers throughout the year to ensure that they feel comfortable.
Okay. Thank you, Amanda.
Ms. Kozlowski?
Thank you. I've had a lot of learning to do on Avid over the course of the last year or so. One of the key pieces that I think about when we're talking about achievement by individual determination, that's the expectation I have of every single student in our district, right? In Avid, out of Avid, where we're going. How are we, navigating? I know that we are rolling this out to all elementary students, and is that an hour a day? How is that working?
Actually, at Avid school-wide, they just take the WICOR strategy, so looking at focused note-taking as an example, and to help lift our curricular resources and our framework. So they really focus on ways that we can better engage students, get students to collaborate with one another. And so it really is, in the school-wide approach, lifting what you are already doing.
So then my second question, and when we speak about academic achievement and curriculum, we're spending a lot of time on curricula, right, and approving that. Is there an approved curriculum that, as a board or as a parent, we see that is being implemented across the district for our students? Do we know what is being the structure of that? I mean, I understand high-level note-taking and organization and collaboration. These are all great skills, don't get me wrong. But one of the key focus areas that we're doing is really trying to get transparency and uniformity, right, across all of our teachers, that we're consistent in the methods, that it's an approved curriculum, and how we're looking at that.
Mm-hmm. So if we take, our newest approval of our writing resource, when we were even looking at those curricular resources, there are lots of Avid strategies built in. They don't call them Avid strategies, but Avid strategies really are about how you get students to think critically, how you get students to write across the curriculum and be able to, clearly communicate. It's getting them to think critically. So, in reading strategies, how are you going in and, reading for a clear purpose and able to go in and locate information to, back your opinion in those pieces. So I would say, once again, the Avid strategies help lift for engagement of our curricular resources that we have, but there are some of those strategies already built into some of the resources that we've most currently adopted without them necessarily saying this is an Avid strategy.
So if I then take it as my last question, to cost, right? So the Avid model is an additional cost to the district in addition to the curriculum that has it embedded. I know, Jody, I've asked you in the past for all of that, and now that we're expanding it, how is the cost and structure going to be kind of implemented as we go through that?
So this year, our cost, bringing on our new schools, we have our cost of membership, and then we have our cost of training. Next year, because all of our schools, minus one, will have been onboarded, our cost is going to actually continue to go down, which is exciting. And the reason we're able to do that is we sent district teams to different trainings at the Avid Summer Institute. And then we are going to work as a district team to bring that learning back and replicate that learning here in Waukesha for our teachers, so that we don't have to send as many people to travel, which will greatly reduce our cost.
Great. It's impressive. I'm still going to go back to wanting to understand exactly how that is taught, what is taught, right, and all of that. That I think that's something for the board that we need to see. If we're getting and spending quite a bit on professional development for this, I do want to be able to understand some of the concepts and structures and layout that is going to be provided our kids. Thanks, guys.
We welcome you to come visit. Just get in touch with me if you'd like to come see an Avid Elective versus Avid School-wide. Our hope is to offer some showcases and spotlight some of our schools, and you will definitely receive invitations to those. So thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Much appreciated. All right, we are now moving into our content areas, and the first one up tonight is social studies. We have an action to consider approval of the social studies resources for grades 6 through 11. We did do the last call last month for follow-up questions, and we have Rachel Herman joining us. Did you have any follow-up items or questions that were brought to you?
I did not have any follow-up questions brought to me, no.
All right, now we have looked at this TCI resource a couple times. Does anybody have questions, comments, more than a couple times? Yeah. Any questions? Okay. Looking to the other side of the table. Okay, we are looking for an action tonight.
I will motion to approve the secondary learning social studies content for 6 through 11.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Kozlowski, seconded by Mr. Moore to approve the TCI grades 6 through 11 social studies curriculum. Any comments? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Just kidding. All right, 5-0.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you. So exciting. It's going to be great. Thank you. So appreciative. Our teachers were in the last 2 days working with us. And yes, beyond excited.
And extend our appreciation to your team. I know they came in July on a summer night late, so much appreciated for all the time that they've spent with us, too.
Yeah. I'm just going to stay here because I'm here
Yep.
for math, too.
All right. Great. And we have Dan Paczynski with us as well, the district math coordinator. Next item on the agenda is discussion on secondary math.
Yeah, so you, like you said, Dan Paczynski here with me. So you saw a presentation around some exciting celebrations around our integrated Math 1 implementation. We were beyond excited to see the work that Dan has been facilitating and the results of that work. That course was implemented in 8th and 9th grade. MAP is really the assessment that we use in 9th grade to measure our standardized math progress. And as you saw in Appendix D that was submitted with your board packets, our students in the integrated Math 1 course surpassed the national norm in terms of achievement. And so again, we made some bold shifts in this course redesign, eliminating some of the remedial courses, integrating, and to see some of the results that have been leveraged was just really exciting. And then in addition, you saw some upcoming curricular work that's happening at our middle school level, including piloting of curricular resources. So again, we have not had a curricular resource aligned to our standards. It's all been homegrown at the middle school level. And so we are here to answer any questions that you might have, but some exciting work ahead.
Thank you. There was so much in the presentation. I'm really grateful. And there were lots of positives. I think quite a few just clarifying details that kind of popped out. What questions or comments do you all have? Mrs. Kozlowski.
Thank you. I thought this was really good. I get excited to be able to start to see giving teachers the tools that we can start to move the academic achievement needle, right? I think that is kind of the driver behind everything that we're working towards. The one question every time I hear pilot, and then we start to come through, my question is, what are we getting rid of? If this is good and our teachers are loving it, we've had some great success in other areas already this year that we've approved. What are we removing? We hear a lot about the teachers and their workload and multiple different pieces that we're piecemealing together. And I love being able to find curriculum that we can solidify and have a uniform. So that's my question to you.
Yeah, sure. This is a multi-stage, multi-year project, and for Integrated Mathematics 1, which is just a mixture of algebra, geometry, and a little bit of probability and statistics, that replaced what we traditionally call Algebra 1. Although 75% of Integrated Math 1 is algebra, that's what it replaced in terms of that. If you're asking about teacher workload, I think the biggest shift for them was, I think everybody gets so excited for a curricular resource. And when you get that excitement, you think work's going to automatically be taken off your shoulders. And what really, the work just shifts a little bit. And it goes from creating everything and planning through creating it. And when you create something, you own it. Whether it matches the standards or that is up for debate, right? But you own it. And so that comfort level is really high. So when you end up using somebody else's curriculum, right? Like we purchased with Agile Mind for Integrated 1, 2, and 3, teachers have to get used to planning in a little bit different way. So that's been the biggest shift for me, and I think that speaks a little bit to your question, what's the big change for our teachers? That's the big shift. So I think the big sigh of relief in terms of getting used to this didn't happen for our Integrated Math 1 teachers until about 3/4 of the way through the year. They've been working really hard, and I'm super proud of them. They've gotten through some bumps to start the year in terms of implementation and figuring out how to teach things best for our students, and I'm just proud of the work that they've put in because they've really committed to it.
Anyone else? Mr. Como.
Hello, welcome. Just real quick, Dan, I wanted to focus a little bit on the middle school and what's coming up here. And this might not sound like much, but, we've never gone through this at the middle school level. Can you kind of talk to what the teachers are saying about that? I'm sure there's excitement built around that.
There's great excitement, and the process started, I would say, 2 springs ago, where we said, hey, how fast do we want to pilot? How fast do we want to get to this place? And they were involved since that very first decision. So our teachers, we've had many great math teachers that have been here in Waukesha for a long time that bring a lot of expertise. And so we held off, we didn't push. We originally wanted to be able to implement now for this school year. And they said, let's hold off a bit and let's do it right. So we spent all last year during their vertical team time, so it wasn't outside of school, really diving into our vision and figuring out, researching what would be best for us. What does research say is what's best? And then what are we going to focus on out of that pool of research? And our teachers are really excited for the opportunity to have great resources. And what's unique compared to 10 years ago is that resources actually match our state standards now. And 10 years ago, they didn't. And I think teachers are invigorated by that. And the technology enhancements that have happened since then make learning mathematics doable all the time for our kids. And both the curricular resources that we we plan to pilot this year have a great mix between paper materials and digital online materials that'll be great for our iPads. And our teachers can't say more about that. They're so excited.
So obviously our hope is to prepare our middle schoolers for high school. And have you talked about how that looks, or is it just still too early because you haven't gotten into some of the details?
No, we actually intentionally started this work at the high school level so that our high school teachers could help develop a vision that could then filter down to our middle school teachers. So that while we may not pick the exact same resources at the middle and high school levels, the resources we do pick match pedagogically. So you're not going to be sitting and getting in one class and then going to the high school level and doing great high-level rigorous mathematics there. So it should flow. It's designed and planned to flow throughout the grade levels.
Yeah, and this board has talked about transitioning between middle school and high school on various topics throughout the years, and it's really exciting to see that in this area, and that hopefully our middle schoolers will be improving their experience and become really prepared for their high school days. This is exciting. It's going to take some time, but everything does at this level. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. I know we've previously approved the progression and just the intersection of these different pieces. And I know that I've kind of pushed on this before, but I kind of want to come back to the 5th, 6th grade piece, which is the beginning of this process, because to me, that's so important that, kids kind of start down the right path. If I understand correctly, Math 6 looks a lot like 5th grade math in that everybody's kind of doing the same, and that acceleration doesn't happen until 7th grade, where they would be doing like 7th, 8th grade more quickly, same resources, if I understand correctly. What happens to a student that's ready for accelerated math coming out of 5th grade? And it's a series of questions, right? How do the parents know? How do the teachers know? What does that planning look like? And what happens if you have a 6th grader who's just not engaged because they're ahead? What do we do about that?
It's a great question, and that's been a tricky one for us to have the perfect answer to. Traditionally, our kids coming out of 5th grade, we have almost 25% of them achieving above the 90th percentile, right? It's a huge number of kids. So how do we challenge everyone who comes in? Probably 3 or 4 years ago, after many years of parents just advocating for their kids, who their students might be labeled GT in mathematics, and pushing for their kids to go directly into accelerated math or maybe mathematics 7 and skip over 6th grade, we developed a process for the top of the top students, achievement-wise, the 99th, 98th percentile students, where in 5th grade, they're actually starting to work on those 6th grade standards. And throughout that process, we don't want kids to skip over the materials. So they're actually working on those 6th grade standards with their teacher using the curriculums that we currently use. And even some kids continue to work on that throughout the summer so that their parents feel comfortable enough for them to make that huge leap. Because that leap from 5th grade all the way to accelerated mathematics actually puts kids into learning what I probably learned as a freshman in high school, traditional algebra. It's a pre-algebra course. So we've put in some practices to help parents and make sure we weren't leaving anybody behind in terms of the 98th and 99th percentile students. But the rest of our kids go into Math 6, and that's our standard placement. And the first opportunity for everybody to accelerate would be accelerated Math 7, 8.
Add one piece, Dr. Pasek, we can get to you what the outline of exactly what that process looks like, because to Dan's point, it's something that he and Rose Palmer, who's our elementary math coordinator, work on together. In terms of how is that communicated, I think that was one of your questions, right, to parents, to students. It starts with Rose Palmer working with those elementary fifth grade math teams in addition to the school principals to make them aware of this is the criteria. They're the ones who are most closely associating with those students' MAP scores, which is really the first standardized criteria that we look at. Then we triangulate that with their continuum, math continuum, and how students are scoring on that. So they're really the first kind of communicator between the student and the family. And then obviously we do have parents who contact the school counselor, who contact again the school administrator. If they, are maybe in that 80th percentile or higher and want to move into an advanced option, we have, again, on the document that we can share with you, kind of a guide to help to make that informed decision based on the appropriate pathway that students should be in. So it is a process that, again, is not as black and white as when we get to that 7th grade official accelerated option, but it is a pathway that we know, again, we have some students who are ready to take that accelerated choice.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. I do think it makes more sense in that 7-8 to integrated 1, because by that time, they're in their second year middle school, we know where they're at and kind of how they're performing. And I would say, if anything, the thing that I want to make sure we avoid is we take that 80th, 90th percentile incoming fifth grader, and they don't make the growth that they're capable of because they're in Math 6, and there's no other option for them. And that if it becomes such an individualized thing, that we don't have the resources or the professional capacity to get everybody where they are at individually. But I just don't want to risk that growth doesn't happen, because we want the kids to be advancing through 4th, 5th grade. And I think that's where the parents probably need a little bit more insight. I just remember going through those transitions as a parent, and understanding what's next and how do I make sure that my child is prepared for what's next. And I think there's some of those questions about are we growing enough in 5th grade that this is an option, or not? And so I that's where I think that making sure that transition between elementary to middle is early and it's engaging.
Yeah, I would add just additionally, I know Dan, when I first came on board, within the first month, I looked at Dan, I'm like, okay, we've got how many kids taking accelerated math in middle school, and what are our forward MAP scores? These two stories do not tell the same thing, right? So I do think, again, there's some work that has to be done with correlating what are we saying students can achieve at, what are the standardized measures saying. That's what his middle school team is going to be diving into. And I think the addition of a curricular resource is, again, going to be so key in helping that, again, to your point, that 6th grade math team where, again, we've been home growing all of that curriculum. Having an instructional resource allows for that teacher to be able to then differentiate based on the needs, not curating all of their own and then leaving some of those students behind that they just don't have the professional capacity to develop for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know you've put a lot of thought into it, Dan.
I can add to that. I'm glad you brought up the curricular resources, because on our rubric to vet the 7 resources that our teachers nominated, now that we're down to 2, both of those were selected by our team because of the ability to differentiate with them, and as well as many other things, but that's one of the great things that both the resources have.
Mr. Como.
So from a 5th grader student's perspective who is gifted in math, is in that 98, 99 percentile, and is in this program right now, what's that look like? Are they video conferencing with a 7th grade teacher? Is it the 5th grade teacher that's just differentiating, and working with the student? How's that look and feel?
It's changed over the last year and a half because various reasons. The first iteration of this, kids were using teachers' Blackboard sites and using videos that teachers had built at the middle school level, and they were just doing that at the elementary. Since those original development, the original curation of those videos and making everything, some of those access to those videos went away. So last fall, we actually came into a problem. Half the videos we had on those sites for kids to use and leverage were no longer available. And so what we ended up using is a program called Zern. It's actually one of the curricular programs that we're going to be piloting this year. And we were able to leverage it to get kids to do some independent work through that program.
It's a great example of how times have changed. I mean, 15 years ago, we used to take that student and bus him up to middle school.
Yeah.
Him or her, and spend some time with the math teachers up there. And I just thought, wow, are we still doing that again? I hope not. But yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's always great to give more opportunities to students.
Anything else? Okay. Well, thank you very much for the update.
Thank you.
Just for timeline purposes, Dan
Yeah.
won't be back, so we are kind of considering this the information item around the pilot resources for middle school. So Dan will be back in, I believe, April for the middle school pilots. He'll be back before that to talk about high school with those updates.
And then for high school, we'll be back in September and October for hopefully our 3 course options for Math 3.
So you get a lot of time with Dan this
Yeah.
year.
We gather a lot. And math is awesome.
I agree. Yes, math is awesome. All right, thank you both. Math is awesome. All right, moving on to our last action item is under our key performance indicators. Action to approve our 3-year key performance indicators, which I think we have wrestled quite a bit over the last few meetings. So I know we made some changes in the last July meeting. Are there any additional questions or comments, maybe a clarification from Mrs. Landish? Nothing has changed since what we reported then to the full board meeting in July.
Just one clarification on I didn't think we were going to have any changes, but the ACT one to make mention, we are going back to the original proposal of the state average as opposed to using language around the national average. And that is because the ACT report out reports the state level composite, and it's all juniors taking it. So that's why we went back to the state. That's also what they report out on rather than national averages by different states using different measures. So that was the only tweak from last month to this month. So it's still a very reasonable KPI for us. If you look at the last 5 years of trend data for us, we have sat below the state average. The ACT data is currently embargoed for this coming year, but we actually sit at the state average this year. I cannot say what the numbers are, but we are increasing, and it's still a worthwhile goal for the 1.0 above.
It's a growth goal.
Yes.
Not as aggressive as the state level, but we did have some conversation about that. And I think what you're saying is getting at that data is more complicated.
Correct.
Any comments or questions about that? I don't have a particular problem with that. Okay, so if approved here, this section would go forward to the full board as we pull all these pieces together. I do, still just want to compliment you, and I think us as a committee, this section, I think, makes the most sense. There are hard measurable goals on the left, and there's clarification of why it's important on the right, and I think we have a little bit of work to do in some of the other areas, but I think this came together very nicely. Yeah, thank you. So we would be looking for a motion to approve the teaching and learning key performance indicators.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Kozlowski.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Zenobia. Any other questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. 5-0. All right, great work. So next on the agenda would be any recommendations for future teaching and learning committee meetings. Okay, everybody's looking down, so I'm going to assume that's a no. Thank you for that. Our next teaching and learning committee meeting is September, help me, I don't have my calendar in front of me. September 6th, here in the boardroom at 6 p.m. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.